The room smelled like burned candles and red wine, and for a moment I thought I was dreaming. My hands were still wet from washing dishes when I saw her, Eleanor, standing in Andy's kitchen like she owned the place. She didn't even flinch when our eyes met. She just tilted her head, like I was some minor inconvenience she had forgotten existed. I froze, my throat tight, because I wasn't supposed to be here tonight. Andy invited me at the last minute, and I said yes because I was tired of eating microwave dinners alone. She turned back to the man beside her, Troy, I think, and laughed. That sound. God, that laugh. It was the same one I used to hear when I told her stupid jokes at 2 a.m. Now it sounded sharper, almost like she was using it to cut me open on purpose. My legs felt like stone, but I forced myself to walk into the dining room, pretending I wasn't already drowning in the sight of her leaning on another man's shoulder. Nobody introduced me. They didn't have to. The tension did all the talking. I sat at the far end of the table, opposite Eleanor, where I could watch her but pretend I wasn't. The food tasted like nothing. I barely chewed, because I couldn't stop staring at how easily she touched Troy's arm, the way her fingers traced the seam of his shirt like it was the most natural thing in the world. My chest felt like it was collapsing in slow motion. And then, out of nowhere, she said it, the line that's still slicing through my head like glass. Wait until he realizes what a real man looks like. Everyone laughed, except me. My fork slipped from my hand and clattered against the plate, but no one even looked my way. I wanted to get up and leave, but I couldn't. I was paralyzed. Not because I cared about looking weak. I've already been called worse, but because I knew if I stood up, I'd either scream or break down in front of everyone. Instead, I watched. And as I watched, I noticed something. Her eyes kept darting toward me. Not with pity. Not even with anger. No, it was something darker, a challenge. Like she wanted me to see what she was doing. Like this was her game, and I was just a pawn on the board. That's when I knew something was going to happen. Something I wasn't ready for. And I swear, if I hadn't heard what she whispered to Troy next, I might have left before the storm hit. I was halfway through my second glass of water when I caught it. Eleanor leaning into Troy, her lips brushing his ear, her voice just loud enough for me to pick up one word that sent chills down my spine. Tonight. It wasn't the word itself, it was the way she said it, like a promise, like something was planned. Troy smirked, and I swear I saw him glance at me for a split second, like I was the punchline to some joke I wasn't in on. My palms were sweating, my throat dry, but I forced myself to keep a straight face, to pretend I didn't just hear the beginning of my own undoing. The dinner conversation blurred around me. Andy was talking about some renovation project, someone else laughed about a vacation disaster. All white noise compared to the pounding in my ears. I watched Eleanor's hands as she picked up her wine glass, slow and deliberate, her nails perfectly painted in a deep shade of crimson. She looked like a stranger wearing the skin of the woman I used to know. It wasn't just the dress or the makeup. It was her eyes. They were sharp, calculating, like she wanted me to see her happiness with him. No, not happiness, triumph. At one point, she caught me staring. Instead of looking away, she held my gaze and smiled, a smile that wasn't sweet or kind, but something else, like she was daring me to react. And God, I wanted to. I wanted to throw the glass against the wall, to tell everyone at that table how she left me with nothing but that poison line, "You're not a man." But instead, I sat there like the spineless guy she always accused me of being, nodding along while my insides twisted like a rope being pulled tighter and tighter. Then Andy, oblivious to the landmine he'd set me on, suggested we all stay for drinks after dinner. "I've got this amazing bourbon," he said, grinning. Eleanor clapped her hands softly and looked at Troy with that same fire in her eyes, as if she'd been waiting for this moment all night. My stomach sank. I knew something was coming. Something bad. But what really set my nerves on fire was the look she gave me when Andy left to grab the bottles. She tilted her head, just slightly, and whispered something to Troy again. He chuckled and nodded, like they'd agreed on a private joke. I swear it felt like I was watching a stage play where everyone knew their lines except me. When the drinks came out, I tried to keep it together, but every time I looked at Eleanor, I felt that same question drilling into my brain. What was she planning? And why did I have this terrible, gut-wrenching feeling that I was about to find out in the most humiliating way possible? I remember the moment the bourbon hit the table because it felt like the air shifted. Andy, being the eternal showman, pulled out a bottle like it was a prize on a game show. You guys have to try this, he said, grinning as he set out heavy glasses. Eleanor's eyes lit up, and she leaned closer to Troy, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear like she used to do with me. Except now it looked rehearsed, deliberate. She caught me watching her and smirked, as if daring me to say something. I didn't. My throat had turned into sandpaper, and I wasn't sure if my voice would even work if I tried. The conversation grew louder with each pour, but I barely registered what anyone was saying. My mind was running circles around that one whisper I heard earlier, tonight. What was happening tonight? Every time Eleanor laughed, I felt my stomach tighten. She had this way of leaning into Troy when she laughed, her fingers brushing his arm, her head tilting just enough to make me remember how it used to feel when she did that to me. It wasn't just flirting. It was a performance, and I was the audience of one. Then she started talking about me. Not directly. She was too smart for that, but in the way you talk about someone without saying their name. She told a story about a friend who didn't know how to change a flat tire, and the whole table laughed when Troy flexed his manly skills, claiming he could fix anything short of a sinking ship. I wanted to disappear. My face burned, my jaw clenched, but I forced a weak laugh, like it didn't bother me. Inside, though, it felt like she was cutting me open with every word. At one point, I excused myself to the kitchen under the pretense of grabbing another drink. I needed air, space, anything to break the tension clawing at my chest. That's when I heard them. Eleanor and Troy, talking in low voices near the hallway. Are you sure he'll stay? Troy asked, his voice a little too amused. He'll stay, Eleanor said. He always stays. He can't stand being the guy who walks away. I froze, gripping the edge of the counter so hard my knuckles went white. They were talking about me. I felt something rise in my throat. Anger, humiliation, maybe both, but I swallowed it down and walked back in as if I hadn't heard a thing. When I returned, Eleanor looked at me like she knew I'd overheard. Her smile was sharp, almost taunting. And then, as Andy started talking about putting on music, she looked me dead in the eye and said, "Why don't you stay a little longer, Harris? I think tonight's going to be memorable." I wanted to ask her what she meant. I wanted to grab my jacket and run out the door. But something in me, some sick curiosity, or maybe just the need to finally understand why she left me with those words, kept me in that seat. I could feel the storm building. And deep down, I knew I wasn't ready for what was coming. I don't think I ever realized how quiet a room could feel, even with laughter echoing around you. Sitting there, with Andy pouring more bourbon and everyone chuckling over some dumb story about their college days, I felt like I was in a glass box, trapped and suffocating. Eleanor sat directly across from me, her wine glass tilted, her lips curved into that almost smile that never reached her eyes. She was watching me, not in a warm way, but like a predator waiting to see how long it would take for me to crack. Every move she made felt intentional. The way she leaned closer to Troy, the way her hand lingered on his chest as she whispered something that made him grin. It wasn't love. It was performance. And the worst part? It was working. I could feel my own silence making me smaller and smaller in that room. When Andy left to grab a new playlist for the music, I caught Eleanor's eyes flicking toward me again, as if she was measuring me. There was something in her expression I hadn't seen before, not just smugness or cruelty, but this twisted sense of amusement. Like she wanted me to see every little dig, every little power play she was setting up. Troy leaned back in his chair, so comfortable, so sure of his role in this little production. And maybe that's when it really hit me. This wasn't just a dinner. It was a test. Her test. She wanted me to break. She wanted me to show everyone that I was still the weak, quiet man she left behind. I tried to focus on anything else, but my mind kept replaying every argument we'd ever had. Her words, "You're not a man." That phrase had become like a curse, looping in my head every time I saw her fingers grazing Troy's shoulder. I kept asking myself what she wanted from me now. If I wasn't good enough for her before, why go out of her way to make me feel this small? Why not just leave me in peace? Then she did something that nearly made me lose it. She leaned forward, resting her chin on her hand, and said, "Remember that cabin trip we took years ago, Harris? That night you got scared of the thunderstorm?" She laughed lightly, shaking her head like it was adorable. The table joined in. Even Andy chuckled. I just sat there, my ears ringing. It wasn't the story itself. Sure, I've always hated storms, but the way she twisted it, turning a private memory into some kind of joke, like I was nothing but a weak man-child in front of her new audience. Before I could respond, Andy's girlfriend suggested a toast. Everyone raised their glasses, but I just stared at mine, my reflection warping in the amber liquid. Eleanor's voice cut through the air like a knife. "To new beginnings," she said. Her eyes were locked on mine as she clinked her glass with Troy's. Something inside me shifted at that moment. Not anger, at least not the kind I could express. It was heavier, quieter. It was the realization that I was sitting here, letting her humiliate me because I still wanted answers. And that meant I was going to see this night through, no matter how ugly it got. As the music started playing and the lights dimmed slightly, I could feel the next act of her game coming. I could see it in her eyes. That storm was about to break wide open, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for what she had planned next. The moment the music started, everything about the room felt different. It wasn't just background noise anymore. It was the soundtrack to something I didn't fully understand yet, a slow and deliberate rhythm that seemed to match the pulse pounding in my ears. Eleanor stood up, her dress catching the light in a way that almost made me forget how much I hated her in that moment. Almost. She took Troy's hand, pulling him to the center of the room like they were about to put on a show. And in a way, they did. He wrapped an arm around her waist as they swayed slightly to the music, but her eyes, they weren't on him. They were on me, piercing right through the space between us like a silent challenge. I felt frozen, my glass still in my hand, untouched. Andy, who was now a couple of drinks past sober, laughed and clapped like it was the most romantic thing in the world. I wanted to grab him and shake him, to tell him this wasn't cute, it wasn't sweet. It was a performance designed to crush me. Eleanor whispered something in Troy's ear, and he laughed loudly, spinning her around in the middle of the room. The sound of her laugh, so free and sharp, hit me like a slap. She knew exactly what she was doing. She was dismantling me, piece by piece, and I was letting it happen. I told myself to leave. Just get up, walk out, save what's left of your dignity. But I didn't move. There was something in me, stubbornness, pride, maybe desperation, that needed to know why she was doing this. Why wasn't it enough for her to leave me broken on the day she walked out? Why twist the knife now? Then, like she could read my mind, she stopped dancing. She walked toward me, slow and deliberate, Troy trailing behind with that smug grin plastered on his face. She stopped just in front of my chair, leaning slightly forward, her perfume hitting me like a memory I didn't want. "Harris," she said softly, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "You look so tense. You always were so tense, weren't you? Even when we were married." She laughed, not cruelly, but like she was talking to a child. I clenched my jaw so hard I thought my teeth might crack. Andy, still oblivious, chuckled and said something about me being the quiet type, but I barely heard him. Eleanor tilted her head and gave me this look. Not pity, but something sharper, something that said she was winning. And in that moment, I realized something. She wanted me to snap. She wanted me to fight back, to lash out, because that would prove everything she believed about me being weak and pathetic. I didn't take the bait. Instead, I forced myself to stand, my legs shaking slightly. "I'm fine," I said, my voice low but steady. She raised an eyebrow, almost surprised, like she hadn't expected me to find my voice at all. I walked past her and into the kitchen, needing space, needing air. That's when I saw it. Her phone, sitting on the counter, lit up with a notification. I don't know what made me look, but I did. And what I saw made my stomach drop. The message preview was from a number I didn't recognize. "Don't forget the pictures for tonight. He needs to see them." My mind went blank. What pictures? What the hell was she planning? I stood there, staring at the glowing screen like it was a ticking bomb, when I heard her voice behind me. "Looking for something, Harris?" I turned, and there she was, standing in the doorway with that same unreadable smile. I froze like a thief caught in the act, her phone still glowing on the counter between us. Eleanor stood in the doorway, one eyebrow raised, arms crossed like she already knew exactly what I'd seen. For a second, I considered lying, pretending I was just looking for more ice or something stupid, but my mind was too loud, and my heart was pounding like a drum. "What are you planning?" I asked, my voice quieter than I wanted it to be. She tilted her head, smirking as if my question amused her. "Planning?" she repeated, stepping closer, her heels clicking against the tiles with that deliberate rhythm that made my skin crawl. You think you're still the center of this story, Harris? She reached for her phone, sliding it off the counter with a flick of her hand before I could even blink. You always did have a habit of snooping when you felt left out. Her words hit me harder than they should have. Left out. That's exactly what I felt, like an outsider in my own life. She slipped her phone into her bag and brushed past me with that intoxicating mix of confidence and cruelty that only Eleanor could pull off. I stood there for a moment, gripping the counter so hard my fingers ached, fighting the urge to just walk out and never look back. But something in that message, "he needs to see them," sank its hooks into me. It wasn't just about me anymore. I had to know what game she was playing. When I returned to the living room, the mood felt different, heavier, like everyone could sense something brewing. Andy had put on louder music, trying to lighten the atmosphere, but I noticed the way Eleanor and Troy sat close together now, whispering like co-conspirators. I tried to make small talk with Andy's girlfriend, but I couldn't focus. Every time I caught Eleanor's eye, she gave me that sly little smile, like she knew exactly how deep I was sinking in my own thoughts. Then it happened. She stood up, holding her wine glass, and announced she had something fun to show everyone. My stomach turned as she reached into her bag and pulled out a small stack of printed photographs. Who even prints photos anymore? My mind was screaming, but I couldn't stop watching. She handed them to Andy first, and I watched as his face shifted from confusion to mild surprise. He passed them along. When they reached me, I almost dropped them. They were pictures of me. Not just me, but me at my worst, slouched on the couch, exhausted and unshaven, staring blankly at the TV in our old apartment. Me asleep with my mouth open, looking half dead. Me trying to fix a leaky faucet, failing miserably while Eleanor stood behind the camera. Every photo was like a punch in the gut, each one a reminder of the version of myself she wanted everyone to see. The man she claimed wasn't really a man at all. Troy laughed, not cruelly, but in that dismissive way that stung even more. Andy looked uncomfortable, glancing between us like he wasn't sure if this was some weird joke or something darker. My hands shook as I stared at the last photo. Me, sitting at our kitchen table, head in my hands, completely unaware she'd been documenting my downfall like some twisted hobby. "What is this?" I asked, my voice hoarse. Eleanor just tilted her head and said, "Memories, Harris. Don't you think it's time you saw yourself the way the rest of the world does?" I could feel something boiling inside me, something I'd buried for years. I wasn't sure if I wanted to scream, cry, or just leave and never look back. But as I looked at her, standing there, so smug, so certain she had the upper hand, I felt something shift. For the first time that night, I wasn't just humiliated. I was angry. The room felt like it was closing in on me, the walls shrinking tighter with every second of silence that followed Eleanor's little performance. My fingers still clutched the stack of photos, each one a reminder of how she saw me. Small, pathetic, not worth fighting for. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, waiting for my reaction. Troy leaned back in his chair with that easy grin, like he was watching a movie he already knew the ending to. Andy shifted uncomfortably, clearly wishing he'd never invited either of us. Even the music seemed too loud, like the soundtrack of some cruel joke I hadn't been told I was part of. I took a deep breath, setting the photos down slowly, carefully, as if they were evidence in some trial. "Is this what you wanted?" I asked Eleanor, my voice calm but shaking just enough to betray the storm inside me. To make me look like some broken joke in front of everyone? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked toward me with that same deliberate grace, the heels of her shoes tapping against the floor like a metronome ticking down to my humiliation. "I just wanted you to see what I saw," she said finally, her voice soft, almost sweet. "You think I left because of one fight? Harris, I left because every single day felt like watching someone slowly fade out. You used to have something, fire, ambition, a spine. And then you just stopped. I couldn't watch it anymore." Her words should have cut me down, and for a moment they did. But something inside me, maybe the last shred of pride I had left, refused to let her win this time. I stood up, my knees unsteady but locked in place. "You think you broke me, Eleanor? You think taking these cheap shots makes you strong? No, it just makes you cruel. You didn't leave because I'm weak. You left because you need someone to look down on, and I stopped letting you." The room went dead silent. Troy's grin faltered, Andy's girlfriend stared wide-eyed, and Eleanor, for the first time that night, looked genuinely caught off guard. For a split second, I thought I saw something flicker in her eyes, something almost like regret, but it was gone as quickly as it came. She folded her arms and smirked, but there was no heat behind it this time. "Wow," she said quietly. "You actually found your voice." I could feel the adrenaline pounding through me, the words I'd been holding back for years spilling out like floodwater. "You want me to see what I am? Fine. I'm not perfect. I'm not Troy with his fake smiles and his gym muscles. But I'm real. I was always real with you, Eleanor. And you turned us into some twisted performance so you could feel like you were winning at something. Well, congratulations. You win." I turned to leave, my heart hammering, my hands still shaking. Andy tried to say something, to smooth it over, but I barely heard him. As I grabbed my jacket from the chair, I heard Eleanor's voice behind me, softer this time, almost uncertain. "Harris, wait." I didn't. I walked out into the night air, the cool breeze hitting my face like a slap. But as I got to my car, I realized something that stopped me cold. I didn't have the answers I wanted. I didn't know why she'd taken those photos, why she'd planned this entire night just to humiliate me. And as much as I hated it, I knew I couldn't just let it end there. When I turned back toward the house, I saw something through the window that made my blood run cold. Eleanor and Troy weren't laughing anymore. They were arguing. I stood in the driveway for a moment, staring through the window like an outsider peeking into someone else's life. Eleanor's face wasn't smug anymore. It was twisted in frustration, her hands moving in sharp gestures as she argued with Troy. He looked annoyed, leaning back, arms crossed, like he'd just realized this evening wasn't going the way he'd planned. A part of me wanted to just drive off, to leave them both to their mess. But something in my gut told me this was the moment I'd been waiting for, the moment where the truth would finally come out. I walked back inside without knocking. The laughter and casual chatter were gone now. Andy and his girlfriend were sitting stiffly on the couch, clearly uncomfortable, while Eleanor and Troy stopped mid-argument the second they saw me. "Harris," she said, her voice tight. "What are you doing back?" "I'm not leaving until I get some answers," I said, surprising myself with how steady I sounded. "You've been playing these games all night, Eleanor. Why? Was humiliating me in front of everyone supposed to prove something?" Troy gave a sarcastic laugh. "Man, don't take it so personally. She's just—" "Shut up, Troy," Eleanor snapped, and the whole room went silent. She turned back to me, and for the first time all evening, I saw her mask crack. There was no smile, no clever smirk, just raw exhaustion. "You want to know why I brought those photos? Because I was angry. Angry at myself for giving up on you. Angry that I let things die between us without saying what I really felt. I thought maybe if you saw what I saw, how far we'd both fallen, it would finally wake you up." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to yell at her for the cruelty of it all, but another part recognized something in her eyes that I hadn't seen in months. Honesty. She looked lost, maybe as lost as I'd been since the day she left. "Eleanor," I said slowly, "if you wanted to wake me up, you didn't need to tear me down in front of strangers. You could have just said you were hurting too." Her eyes softened, and for a moment, the tension in the room seemed to lift. Troy rolled his eyes and muttered something about not signing up for this drama, then grabbed his jacket and stormed out. "Good riddance." Andy mumbled an excuse and quickly left the room with his girlfriend, giving us space we both desperately needed. We sat there, just the two of us, the silence heavier than anything. Finally, she spoke. "I don't know what I want anymore, Harris. But I do know this. You're not the man I said you weren't. You showed me tonight that you have more strength than I gave you credit for. Maybe I needed to see that too." I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like that broken guy she'd left behind. I felt grounded. I felt enough. "Maybe we both needed to wake up," I said. "We didn't have some dramatic kiss or sudden reconciliation." But as I left that night, Eleanor walked me to the door, and for a brief second, her hand brushed mine, a silent truce. Maybe it meant nothing, or maybe it was the start of something new. Either way, I got into my car feeling lighter than I had in months. Driving home, I realized something important. I didn't need her approval to feel like a man. I didn't need anyone's. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. And that, I think, was the real victory of the night.